Hi everybody, it's Dr. Sherry Caplan for VitalityMD doing another segment on Ask the Doctor. Last week we talked about one of my male patients who had complained about having difficulty losing weight despite exercising and having what he thought was a very good diet, and we went through like what are all the potential causes to weight gain and that it's very multifactorial. But I promised you this week that I was going to talk about exogenous ketones, as that's a hot topic, but I also want to talk a little bit about insulin resistance and how this all plays into weight gain. And that basically, the bottom line is that when insulin is really high, that it sends the signal to store energy or excess energy as fat. And that unfortunately the way most people are eating today, or the standard American diet, really encourages high insulin levels. And so really what we need to sort of think about is sort of changing the way we eat, at least especially to make ourselves become more insulin sensitive, so that we can actually improve our ability to burn fat and lose weight. So the bottom line is when insulin's high, we're in this storage form of, our body's in this process of storing fat, as opposed to, and actually when insulin's high, we can't actually produce ketones, and we're using carbs as our energy. When insulin's low, ketones actually can be high, and then we start using ketones as a method of energy, and that basically ketones in themselves have benefits. So ketones improve brain function, and basically it helps curb our appetite. It helps with lowering triglycerides and improves other cholesterol parameters. It increases fat loss, and also specifically in the abdomen area. And so it is this balance between insulin and ketosis that we're also trying to manage. So that's where a lot of people do a ketogenic diet. So they're eating good amounts of proteins, good fats, and kind of keeping carbs to a minimum, so that we can actually get insulin to come down to a baseline. So we need some all the time, but we just don't need high amounts. And what was really interesting that I've learned, I was watching one of Mike Mutzel's podcasts, and he was interviewing Dr. Benjamin Bickman, who has a lot of interesting information, and which I'm going to talk a little bit about, but that, there's different ways for us to become insulin resistant. So one is, again, the way we eat can cause insulin resistance, and so insulin's high, our cells start ignoring the insulin around, and basically you need higher and higher levels of insulin to sort of get the sugar from the bloodstream into the cells to generate energy. And that's why, people eat all this sugar and still kind of feel hungry. It's because the cells aren't getting the energy they require. So that's one way of being insulin resistant, but it ends up that inflammation in the body, just general inflammation, and there's a zillion things that cause inflammation, can actually increase ceramide deposition, which is a form of fat in all the cells, and specifically in muscle cells. And because we have a large amount of muscle in our body, that actually makes our body actually quite insulin resistant. So basically having high ceramides in the cells themselves cause the insulin resistance. So basically treating inflammation will actually help us make us more insulin sensitive. And that basically also we have two different types of fat. So we have brown fat and then we have white fat, and we actually can make brown fat in the milieu of having high insulin actually makes brown fat act like white fat, which that's actually quite interesting, because everybody thinks that as brown fat is, it sort of helps generate heat and burn calories. And so we want more of that, but in fact high insulin actually makes whatever brown fat we have not as efficacious. And that we actually have a way of taking white fat and making it act more like brown fat. And basically it ends up that intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding can actually help make our white fat act more like brown fat. And so a lot of people have tried intermittent fasting, and I think that's a good tool, but you really need good guidance to make sure you're doing it right. And some people go overboard, where restricted feeding, meaning like you kind of restrict how many hours in the day that you actually feed. So like an example is maybe you skip breakfast and maybe eat at 12 o'clock lunch, and then you have supper at 6, and then you don't eat again till the next day. That's a form of restricted feeding, and that actually will improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and has all these other health benefits. Now, the reason why we sort of did this session was to talk about exogenous ketones, because everybody's like, well, ketones are great because it helps you burn fat and whatnot. You know, what about if we just actually took ketones as a supplement, because that's the new big thing. And it's actually very interesting, because even myself was like, cool, I can do that, you know, still have my cake and then have some, you know, drink or take some ketones, and it'll put me in ketosis and I'll burn fat. But it ends up that, again, it's that ketone and insulin balance. So if you have high insulin, so you had that piece of birthday cake or a lot of carbs, and then you took the ketones as a supplement, the high insulin overrides the ketones, and actually high insulin causes lipogenesis, which is, you know, building of fat or storing of fat. And so it will actually, you can actually use ketones to make fat molecules. So in fact, we might actually not having any benefit. Maybe initially you might, but then with time, you're actually going to probably increase deposition of fat. So I guess that my take, at least at the moment, is we have to be cautious or think twice about taking exogenous ketones in an environment where you are still eating a lot of carbs and you have insulin resistance. Now, that may still be beneficial if you're watching what you're eating and then you're taking exogenous ketones to up your ketone levels. Also, ketones, the exogenous ketones, may be beneficial in traumatic brain or you know, cognitive issues or stuff that we want to improve brain function. Anyways, that's my session today on Ask the Doctor. I hope you found it very helpful and informative. If you like what you see, like us on Facebook. If you want me to answer any other questions, then email us at info@vitalitymd.com. And thank you very much, and see you next week.